station. Those are the 4 larger circles in a rectangular shape there around the hatch.
Those forward bulkhead Dracos will perform some of the more important deorbit maneuvers, or departing and deorbit maneuvers, namely the deorbit burn, which is a 16.5-minute burn. Very, very essential that those forward bulkhead Dracos execute that maneuver. It commits them to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, aiming for what is the prime location now of Pensacola, Florida. Very shortly after that 16.5-minute burn, it will only take a couple of minutes for the nose cone, which you're seeing opened up here from this view at the very top portion of your screen. That will only take a couple of minutes to close and protect some of those critical components, including the docking mechanism, the forward bulkhead Dracos, some of the guidance and navigation equipment. But for the most part, during this flight, the nose cone will remain open.
Keeps having to readjust that we have here. Keeps having to readjust because Crew Dragon is currently performing one big loop of the station, and of course the camera has to readjust in order to keep Dragon in its views. Just coasting away.
We're in this cruise phase for a little less than 10 minutes until we execute the 3rd of 4 fly-around burns. This will take us from the nadir, or the very bottom portion of the International Space Station, in between the station and the Earth. Another 50-second burn to bring it to the very forward end.
As we mentioned before, Megan and Shane are still in their suits and buckled into their seats. However, Thomas Pesquet is taking photos for this fly-around maneuver, and Aki is also out of his seat assisting Thomas to take these photos. As Gary mentioned before, the crew will be taking off their suit in a little while to get comfortable in it's not really a break period, but it is a small break in the action before the dynamic events pick back up again prior to re-entry. But these spacesuits are custom fitted for each astronaut. They go through a series of checkouts prior to leaving the station, and so they'll do the same once again when they put the suits back on. But as you mentioned before, we saw Thomas get out of his suit pretty quickly. Actually, I was really surprised to see how fast he popped back up on screen, ready to begin the fly-around maneuver and begin using that DSLR camera to take photos. And yeah, so each of these suits are custom fitted for each individual astronaut. So there's no option to switch around.
You are committed to a suit.
Yeah.
All right, we got a little less than 10 minutes of this cruise phase until we execute that other burn. There's 2 more. One that brings us from the bottom portion, the nadir position, over to the forward position. Through the remainder of this fly around, we should be in daylight. So we'll get fantastic views of both the Dragon and the International Space Station as we acquire the signals from space to go ahead and provide that to you. But again, Thomas Pesquet will be photographing the station. At this point of the journey, there is a chance that Mark Vande Hei, on board the International Space Station, is inside the cupola, and we'll be able to capture some images from the Dragon. Now getting views from inside Dragon. The cabin lights are still off to reduce the glare from the window which Thomas Pesquet is at, to allow him to take some photos of the International Space Station. Very, very clear. Now we're getting the views of the Dragon from the space station. Absolutely beautiful. We're now over the North Pacific Ocean, about 260 statute miles. We just passed over the east coast of Japan.
In this view here, we have a great shot of the forward hatch with that nose cone open, as we've said before. And if you're looking closely, you might see there's a great side-by-side there of the station and Dragon looking back at each other. And that view of Dragon, you can actually see the fins of the Dragon trunk. So if you were wondering what from this angle might have looked like little spikes coming out from the side of Dragon, they look like spikes from this angle, but they're actually fins that are built into the trunk section, or the unpressurized section of Crew Dragon. That trunk will be jettisoned prior to the capsule coming back. Once that trunk is jettisoned, that will expose the heat shield, which is of course what we need in order to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and splash down.
That heat shield has the very important job of slowing the Dragon from what is essentially 17,000 miles per hour to about 350 miles per hour. A ton of energy, as the Dragon itself is really engulfed in plasma that's reducing that speed quite drastically. Once it gets down to 350 miles per hour, it's really up to the parachutes and the atmosphere itself to slow Dragon down through a series of drogue and main parachutes down to a mere 15, 16 miles per hour before it splashes down off the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, while the temperatures near the heat shield can get close to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, the inside of the cabin stays a pretty comfortable temperature. The crews that we have brought back home have indicated that it's actually a pretty comfortable ride in Crew Dragon during that descent phase.
Wonderful side-by-side views. We're getting feeds from both the Dragon and the International Space Station. From the space station view, you're seeing the underside, as the Dragon spacecraft, you can see, is wedged between the space station and the Earth. And by wedged, I mean there's a 250-mile distance between those two things. But right now, the Dragon is about 200 meters from the International Space Station. And we're seeing some of the features now. Cabin lights inside Dragon, as we get some of those feeds as well, still turned off, allowing the photographs to be taken of the space station, part of this photographic survey of the exterior. And of course, we're getting wonderful views from the station, looking down at the Dragon capsule. Right below them, 259 statute miles, is the North Pacific Ocean.
Endeavour SpaceX on the Big Loop. Nadir waypoint has been reached.
Endeavour copy.
And we're now directly beneath the International Space Station, the Nadir waypoint. We are now executing a 50-second burn to maneuver from the Nadir point, or the Earth-facing side of the space station, over to the forward end. And that burn is in progress. And that 50-second burn is complete. You can see we're essentially right below the International Space Station. And we're getting some great coverage, both from the space station side using Tedra's satellites, as well as the Dragon spacecraft. Right below the Dragon spacecraft, you were seeing some of the coastline of the Marshall Islands in the Pacific Ocean.
Once again, the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft is basically directly below the station at this point in time. We are executing a fly-around maneuver, which is essentially one big loop around the space station. And the reason for doing this is we're doing a photographic survey of the station, thanks to the several new installations on station over the last few years. The last fly-around maneuver was performed in 2018, and unfortunately, just because of positioning of some of those onboard cameras on station, they can't quite see everything. So this photographic survey will help fill in some of those blanks of the exterior of the station. So we're about halfway through the maneuver. Once again, we are directly below the station. And Thomas Pesquet, the designated photographer on board today, is taking photos actually right through that small white hole there in the center of the hatch. So what we saw there is the forward hatch, and that small white light is a little window there in the forward hatch, and Thomas Pesquet is taking photos out of that hatch of the station to complete this photographic survey.
On board the International Space Station, Mark Vande Hei, the sole NASA astronaut on board the orbiting laboratory, has been relieved of the duties to monitor the undocking and retreat of the SpaceX Dragon and the Endeavour crew inside, but now is in a position inside the cupola. He mentioned he was going to go over with a digital camera from his side and take some wonderful photographs of the crew during their fly-around maneuver. The cupola faces towards the Earth and provides some fantastic views of the planet as they orbit the Earth every 90 minutes. It's also used for some operational reasons, like capturing spacecraft from inside the cupola. They're able to control the station's robotic arm and get a good view of some of the spacecraft that they're capturing.
As Gary mentioned before, the remainder of the fly-around maneuver should be in orbital daylight. And while it was pretty cool to have the nighttime photos, because we could actually see the pulses from the Draco thrusters as that was occurring, gotta say these daylight views are pretty breathtaking.
And we'll see them for the remainder of the fly-around. Some Pacific Island chains that we're seeing as we head on a southeasterly course down the Pacific Ocean, heading towards the South Pacific. We'll make our way up and cross over the South America as we continue the fly-around maneuver.
If you've just recently joined us, the Crew-2 crew is on board Crew Dragon Endeavour, which we just had a view of moments ago. They have departed the space station. They had an on-time separation at 11:05 a.m. Pacific, and they are currently executing a fly-around maneuver around the station. And after that, they will be executing 4 burns, essentially, a series of carefully choreographed maneuvers in order to put Dragon on a trajectory back home. We are anticipating a splashdown at 7:33 p.m. Pacific time this evening, just off the coast of Pensacola, Florida.
We're getting high-definition views from the International Space Station. these cameras on a camera assembly, which includes high definition and standard definition views, as well as the ability to manually control each of the individual cameras that are positioned on the station's truss. There is a single position inside Mission Control Houston now, the Cronus position, a person who is literally on the ground in Houston, manually controlling each of these views. The Cronus has full autonomy to position the cameras wherever is needed to get views of the action. In this case is the fly around of Crew-2 and Dragon Endeavour around the International Space Station. Earlier you were seeing that same console position adjust the exposure or the aperture of some of the cameras, which allows the some of the plumes coming from the Draco thrusters to be seen as the image is overexposed. But in this scenario with the daylight, we can very clearly see the Dragon making its way to the forward end of the station. And we're seeing some features of the space station itself. Right now you're seeing on the very bottom left of your screen the gem. This is the Cronus. This is the individual, the Cronus. He's actually sitting there controlling the cameras on the International Space Station. Not a bad job to have. As he's using some of the truss cameras, they're high definition, to check out some of these views. This is the Japanese module. You can see on the very right the flag of Japan clearly marked on that module. Right above that, towards the space-facing side, is the logistics module, essentially a storage area. And then the Japanese module has its own airlock to put out experiments. It's too small to fit humans. We have bigger airlocks for that. But this airlock is small enough to fit some of the payloads or experiments, many of which you see on this external platform, each with their own grappling fixture to allow the robotic arm to maneuver it wherever it needs to go. One of the experiments on that external platform is called the OCO3, or the Orbit Carbon Observatory 3. As the space station covers about 85% of the inhabited Earth, that one of the experiments is looking down at the Earth, monitoring carbon all across the planet. We're seeing that external facility as well as the Dragon come into the forward end of the International Space Station, hovering about 200 meters away. Fantastic views all around.
And as we've mentioned earlier, the whole point for doing this fly-around maneuver essentially is to take pictures of the station. There have been a number of new installations put on station since the last fly-around maneuver, and so this is a great opportunity to document the exterior of the station, basically do a photographic survey, and be able to see parts of the station that some of the onboard cameras might not be able to reach. If you look closely, you can still see Dragon. They're just kind of off to the right hand, slightly right of center.
Yeah, you gotta squint.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see a little bit of there, pretty much directly in the center of the screen now. Gary, a lot of what you just mentioned about all the different modules and components of the space station really highlight the first and possibly the most important thing about the space station is that it is international. It is the International Space Station, and all of these experiments and modules are a really great representation of teamwork. Also represented by our crew members on board today. We have JAXA astronaut Akihiko Hoshide, European Space Agency astronaut Thomas Pesquet, and of course, two NASA astronauts, Shane Kimbrough and McArthur. So it's a great demonstration of international effort.
And cooperation, really. You were seeing some of the features on the space station themselves, modules owned and operated by different space agencies. We even have commercial modules as we're transitioning to enable commercial activities in low Earth orbit, all enabled by this orbiting complex. Now getting some fantastic brand new views from the Dragon crew, taking photos of the outside all along the way, being able to capture for history this moment in time, 2021, as we have new modules that have been added since the last photographic survey, which happened in 2018 aboard a Russian Soyuz. We added some commercial modules, some international and commercial partnerships, namely the commercial module being the Nanoracks Bishop airlock, and then that international commercial partnership being the Bartolomeo platform, an external platform on the Columbus side, which we haven't seen. We've seen the external platform on the Japanese side, but from this view, now that the Dragon is approaching the very forward end of the International Space Station, which it should be getting to here momentarily, about 10 minutes. This is approximately the position where the Dragon is now, a little more than halfway to the very forward position, but right about that position, they should be getting some very good views of some of those new modules, including and platforms, including Bartolomeo. And this will be the first time that we've had views like this of Bartolomeo as part of an external survey, part of the ever-evolving International Space Station.
So they're a great shot looking top-down from the station at Dragon. As what appears to us as the bottom part of Crew Dragon comes into view, you can actually see the side hatch door, which is where the crew entered into the capsule 199 days ago when they launched from Pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center. That hatch has been closed since, and it will reopen tonight after they splash down off the coast of Florida. And that will, once that side hatch opens, that will basically be their first breath of fresh air since launching almost 200 days ago.
I bet they are very excited to see their families once again. It won't be long until they are recovered by the SpaceX recovery teams. They're joint with NASA and as well as some European doctors. It truly is an international effort, even out in the middle of the Gulf, to recover some of these crew, but it won't be long until they're flown back to shore. They'll have planes stationed for them, ready to get them back home to see their respective families.
That is an incredible shot there of the earthly horizon with Crew Dragon rising above.
Bonus points to Cronus.
Somebody at Houston, please give him a gold star.
It's a very slow and calculated maneuver. You can see all along the way, now that we have the view of the Dragon against the blackness of space with the overexposed camera views from the station cameras, you can see that all along the way, the Draco thrusters have been firing to continue to keep Dragon in the intended position. All along the way, we've been seeing essentially the same view, much like we see the moon, right? We always see the same face of the moon anywhere it is in the sky. We are seeing the same face of the forward end of the Dragon, as it is critical that we have that same hatch with the windows facing this way to allow Thomas Pesquet to continue his photographic survey. It's only a few more minutes that we're in this phase, which is the cruise phase between the nadir and the forward positions. Once we meet that forward position on the V bar, the velocity bar, essentially directly in front of the International Space Station, Dragon will automatically execute a 50-second burn, the final fly-around burn, the fourth of 4, to move it from the forward end back to the zenith end, effectively doing a full loop around the International Space Station. The last quadrant from there are 2 departure burns where the Dragon and the crew will break away from this fly-around position about 200 meters from the International Space Station and start exiting the keep-out sphere, the sphere which it's essentially been hugging for this entire maneuver, about a 200-meter circle around the space station. It'll exit the keep-out sphere and then the approach ellipsoid. There we have a graphic as we're getting dual views of both the Dragon capsule as well as the maneuver itself. You can see we are in the 3rd cruise phase of 4. Very shortly we'll be executing that 4th burn maneuver. You can see at the far left of the graphic, that's the 4th maneuver. It's directly in front of the International Space Station. It's at that position where that 4th burn maneuver is executed. That is where the Crew-3 Dragon and the Endurance crew will be heading in just a couple of days to the forward end to meet up with the docking axis of the forward port of the space station and move into dock for their 6-month stay. After that 50-second burn, that is the last cruise phase. They'll meet up with the same point where they started, which is essentially on the R bar, or it's a vertical line right through the middle of the space station, where the Dragon will automatically execute the depart burns, which you can see on the graphic there, depart burn 0 and depart burn 1 to get it outside the approach ellipsoid. It's a 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer by 4 kilometer oval shape that's around the space station. And once it exits there, we'll stop joint operations between the station and Dragon mission control teams. And from there on, it's really Mission Control Hawthorne that's taking the Crew-2 Endeavour astronauts home, back to planet Earth.
The teams here in Mission Control Hawthorne have been busy over the last several days in preparation for Dragon's departure and, of course, the intended launch of the Crew-3 crew. So it's been pretty busy here, trying to juggle the opportunities to both return crew and launch crew. Of course, if you've been following along, weather has, up until this point, not been playing very nice with us. But fortunately, we do have an opportunity. Obviously, as we've undocked, we do have an opportunity to splash down today, return the Crew-2 crew home. And we're expecting that splashdown to occur at 7:33 p.m. Pacific time. And while it is preferred that we launch the next crew prior to bringing the previous crew home, just because of those weather conditions and limited opportunities for splashdown going forward later in the week, the teams jointly decided, both SpaceX and NASA worked together to determine that the best course of action for both crews was to bring Crew-2 folks home prior to letting the Crew-3 launch proceed.
That's right, Kay, and as you mentioned, the reason that we're seeing Crew-2 Endeavour in this position right now is we've done several weather briefings throughout the week. We did one immediately before docking. We want to make sure that the weather at the landing site, the prime site, which is Pensacola, Florida, for today, is looking good, and it continues to look good. We'll continue to hear weather updates through the entire phase of flight, all the way down through just before committing to that D-orbit burn. We'll do another weather briefing just to make sure that everything down in the Gulf looks A-OK. And part of the reason that we're seeing this today is because it really does look like the best opportunity for the crews. Again, all along the eastern seaboard and the ascent corridor for Crew-3 not looking as great, but the Gulf looks pretty good. So we transition to an indirect handover to allow Crew-2 to splash down first because the weather is looking so good.
My view there on your screen now, coming from the International Space Station, as Crew Dragon has departed and is in the final phases of completing the fly-around maneuver, which is basically a photographic survey of the exterior of the space station. And like I said, we're coming close to the end of that maneuver. Daylight once again, as you just saw moments ago. We have some pretty incredible shots.
We're in the final minutes of that third cruise phase between the nadir side, or the bottom portion, to the very forward end of the International Space Station. It's really a matter of moments at this point before we hear that the Dragon and the crew, here we go.
Endeavour SpaceX on the big loop. The forward waypoint has been reached.
Endeavour copies forward waypoint.
And with that forward waypoint reached, the Dragon is automatically executing a 50-second burn, now in progress. It's the final fly-around burn for today. It should be a matter of moments until it's complete, and there it is. Looks like the fly-around burn, the 50-second burn, is complete, so that's it. That is the final.
Fly-around is done.
They still have that cruise phase of the final quadrant. That's at the forward end to the zenith end, so they'll be able to survey the very forward end of the space station. They'll get a good look at the forward docking port, where Crew 3 is going to be docking to in a couple of days here. They'll be able to see the Japanese module, the European module, and you can see they'll see a lot of the United States orbiting segment, which includes a lot of the U.S. modules as well. And they'll, of course, see the back of the Russian modules, but they were already surveyed as part of burns 1 through 3. That's the final burn, so they're now in the cruise phase, and they'll continue to drift for the next about 20-25 minutes until they reach that depart burn 0. It'll be essentially at the same point where that first fly-around burn was executed, right in that same position. The difference, this whole fly-around maneuver, about 200 meters from the International Space Station, and then execute another one to exit the approach ellipsoid, which is an imaginary marker that will effectively end joint operations between the Mission Control Houston and Mission Control Hawthorne. Although Houston will be monitoring along the way, it's really up to the Dragon teams here in Hawthorne to carry the crew home.
There on your screen, while the shot was still overexposed, just a little bit now as well, you can actually see the Draco thrusters firing, which of course are allowing Dragon to hold its position during this very carefully choreographed maneuver around the station.
And it's about 20 to 25 minutes that the Dragon will be in this drifting phase. And like Kate said, we'll see the Draco engines firing along the way just to keep it in that same orientation, making sure that forward end, the open hatch that you can see there, that's where the Dragon was docked to the station for 197 days. And it's also at the very center of which you can see sort of a light at the very center of that docking port, or the hatch. That's where Thomas Pesquet is taking some of those photos. He's got about 20 to 25 minutes left of this before the Dragon automatically executes a departure burn 0. The entire way should be in daylight, so we should be seeing great views as long as we have coverage, right? We need the geosynchronous satellites, the TDRS satellites, to provide some of those high bandwidth views, to provide these high definition camera views from the station looking at Dragon. We may even see some of the similar views from Dragon looking at station. But it's about 20-25 minutes until we get to that point. Dragon will automatically execute depart burn 0 and 1, and all crew members, including Shane Kimbrough and McArthur, who I believe are still in their SpaceX launch and entry suits in the commander and pilot seat monitoring this entire maneuver, they'll be able to take a short break, doff their suits for just a little bit, just a couple of hours, until they have to put them back on again, getting ready for the final phase of flight, which is the dynamic part of the flight. It is the deorbit burn, and the entry into Earth's atmosphere, slowing down Dragon from 17,000 miles per hour to a mere 350 miles an hour.
Hmm.